Hello everyone, Books with Banks back again with another video, a slightly different new style of video today I want to try out. It's going to be a bit of a guessing game, but before getting too far into all of that, a few notes. The last video I posted was an interview with Steven Erikson, one of my favorite authors of all time, and I'm honestly still getting over the sort of starstruck shock and nerves of that conversation. It was so much fun. Please go check that out if you haven't already, and especially if you're a huge Malazan fan like myself. Erikson very generously drops several cool hints and details about his writing process for works in progress. I am so grateful to Erikson as well as the community on here on BookTube for everything about that video, the response to it, the making of it, all of that. I should also say in that video I mentioned some other YouTubers who have also talked about Erikson's Carcanis books, and I forgot to mention one booktuber that I really enjoy. This is Really Good and Kind's channel, so please go check that out if you're interested in more Malazan content, more Carcanis content. At that channel, I think he has a really kind of unique wit and style for analysis that suits Malazan stuff really, really well. Anyway, of course, if any of you haven't already and you're really enjoying my stuff, it would mean a lot if you could like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much, but now moving on to this video. So I recently read a classic story, and while this story has been reproduced so often in pop culture and referenced constantly, I was actually surprised by how many details of the story I was personally unfamiliar with, and I think this might be the case with a lot of classics, and therefore, no matter how sure we are that we know a story just because and just by the conversation around it and how often it's been reproduced and referenced in current, present-day pop culture and media, I think it's always a worthwhile exercise to go back and actually read the actual text of the original to enjoy everything around kind of that bare bones version that is all that's really survived to this day in our collective knowledge and kind of social discourse and references. So I'm going to give a few details about this story, and I want you all to maybe kind of play along and try and see if you can guess what story I'm talking about. I'll go through like 6 sort of different points here, details. Maybe let me know down below in the comments if you figure it out at like which bullet point you got it, you knew what story I was talking about. And some of you will get this right off the bat, some of you might not know until I reveal what it is. So number 1, the first detail, is that our protagonist, and really our main character, is a lawyer by the name of Mr. Gabriel John Utterson. Number 2, this story takes place in an 1800s, 19th century London setting. Number 3, there's a lot to do with analyzing peculiar wording in wills and letters, a lot of reading of letters and notes left behind. There's also some handwriting comparative analysis. Number 4, other characters of note in this story include a butler named Mr. Poole, an old friend named Dr. Lanyon, and a newer friend named Mr. Richard Enfield. Point number 5, the basic plot is that Mr. Utterson, our main character, our lawyer, he is concerned about the suspicious activities of one of his older friends and clients, and in particular, Mr. Utterson takes issue with his older friend's new and mysterious, possibly violent new acquaintance. And number 6, and the kind of final point I'll give here, final clue I'll give, this whole story is a painful look at substance abuse, but not as I had initially expected to be from the point of view of the abuser, but it's actually told from the point of view of acquaintances and friends like Mr. Utterson, like the lawyer, who are helplessly looking on and wondering what's really going on with and how to resolve their friend's unfortunate, albeit mysterious, situation. So, now for those of you who have read this story, especially if you've read it recently, you no doubt figured out what story I was talking about within the first couple of details, the first couple of clues, and still some of you might not be 100% sure that you know what it is, but you might have your suspicions, especially after points clues 5 and 6. But if you could correctly identify what story this is, as I mentioned before, please comment at which clue, which number you figured it out. Especially if you haven't read this story, you know. The point, however, of this whole exercise is how important all of those details and those clues I gave are to the original text of the story, yet how rarely any of those details are commonly reproduced when we talk about the story anymore today. So, without any further ado, the story I'm talking about is, drumroll, none other than Robert Louis Stevenson's classic novella, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, first published in 1886. I cannot believe I had never actually sat down and read this story, but it kept coming up as an example of early Gothic horror and kind of suspense short fiction. I would personally consider it definitely more that Gothic horror side. There's this great literalized metaphor for addiction and substance abuse. Also, stuff about the duality of man, and how substance abuse exposes that duality, turns us into basic beasts and like the worst versions, most monstrous versions of ourselves. That's all really, really strong, really well done. I totally did not expect this story to be from the point of view of an old friend of Dr. Jekyll's, helplessly watching Jekyll succumb to this mysterious addiction. Also, I didn't expect this to play out like it really plays out like a couple of murder mysteries wrapped into one sort of short novella. Because first we have the man that Mr. Hyde kills, and everyone already has their suspicions of this weird Mr. Hyde character. But then after he kills this man, Mr. Hyde vanishes, leaving the police and Mr. Utterson just left wondering what happened to Hyde and whether or not Dr. Jekyll knows more than he is sharing about who they all think at this point is just some weird friend of Jekyll's. Then, in the end, it is believed for at least a brief moment that Hyde had actually broken into Jekyll's laboratory and killed the doctor himself, but through the reading of letters and notes left behind by Jekyll and another doctor friend, the true story unfolds itself in the last couple of chapters. Really, a brilliant read. I had so much fun with this one. I highly recommend you go check out this story if you haven't read it for yourself. And if you enjoyed this type of guessing game sort of video, let me know down below if I should do more of these whenever I read classics. Also, as I mentioned a moment ago, let me know if you guessed right and guessed along the way what story I was talking about and which clue you figured it out at. And last but not least, let me know any classics you yourselves might have read that caught you by surprise, just how much more there was to those stories than what survived into popular culture today. Anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.